So finally today, we're going to look at how we can use these conversational tools that we've spoken about so far to develop and create a great first message to send someone you're attracted to when you see them online. So a lot of the tools that we've spoken about already, you'll find are exactly the same for sending an effective message. We don't want to say something that's generic. We don't want to ask a question that we don't care about. We don't want to just ask them questions and not share anything about ourselves. And we want to be a good listener or perhaps a good reader. All of these principles apply exactly the same to sending messages online. Now, I want to also quickly acknowledge that the responses that you get to your messages online aren't just a reflection of the quality of message you send. It's also about how good your profile pictures are, your profile write-up is, and of course a little bit of luck. But that is a subject for another webinar session. So instead, we want to, at this point in time, just think about how can I make that message that I send to someone as good as possible. So first of all, let's look at what some messages to send are that wouldn't work so well. So we want to really avoid small talk style messages. So that could be, hey, how are you? Hey, what are you up to? Hey, how's your lockdown going? Now remember, a lot of the time, this person is going to have heard that question quite a few times before, and so your ability to stand out to them is going to be diminished if you use that very generic question. So we want to really avoid using cut and paste, low investment messages which don't communicate anything about ourselves and also don't allow the other person to really open up. They get us stuck in that small talk land that we've been trying really hard to avoid. We also don't want to go to the other extreme of that and send someone our autobiography, plus, say, asking them out straight away. If we ask somebody out on the very first message that we send to them, what it accidentally communicates is, you know, you've already passed, you know, just based on your photos alone, I would love to go out with you. And instead, before we take that next step in an interaction, we really want to give the other person an opportunity to also communicate with us and invest in the interaction. We want to be able to pay them an amazing compliment like, I like how tenacious you are, or I like how spontaneous you are, before we really ask for that all-important date. So how do we get to a point where we can get them to open up on their messages, and how do we send a message that is much more effective for getting a response online? So ideally what we want to do is, of course, look at their profile properly and write them a quality message that picks up on details from their profile. Now, I know what you're going to ask me, which is, well, Hayley, what do I do if they haven't written anything on their profile yet? In that case, you could say something like, so tell me something I wouldn't have guessed about you from your profile. And to all of those slightly naughty people out there who haven't completed their online dating profiles yet, make sure you complete your profile. It makes it way easier for people to message you, and it also gives you a much better insight into who is taking the time to read your profile properly. So always make sure that you fill that out. Now, instead, if they hoping that the person has put a few details of their profile online, let me just give you a couple of examples again of the kind of profiles someone might put up, and then we can think together about, okay, if someone put that on their online dating profile, what could we then say to a person? So imagine that a person's got a lot of pictures about them traveling the world, or they've expressed a love of travel in their profile. That's going to be pretty common. So what could you write to them in that case? Well, you could say, you could simply acknowledge, I love the fact that you're into travel. Then you could share some information about yourself. You could use that go first principle, which could be, I don't know about you, but I've already booked my 2021 vacay. Another thing you could do is you could look at what they've put in their profile, and you can compare and contrast whether you're interested in the same things as them. So say someone has a profile and you can see them hanging off a bouldering or rock climbing wall on one of their pictures. That's obviously something they're interested in, so that would be a great thing to pick up on in your first message. Now you might think, well, that's great, but you wouldn't catch me dead going to a climbing wall, or I'm afraid of heights, and that's okay. And again, what you can do there is pay that killer compliment. You can say, I like that you're into rock climbing. And then you could share information about yourself that contrasts that. You could say, I don't suppose I could convince you to try Latin dance instead. So sending an effective first message is really about showing that you've really read and focused on a person's profile. This is because you want to walk into that dating experience remembering what qualities you're looking for and being discerning. You don't want to just write any old message to any old person. You want to look out for people who stand out to you, who you think you might have a connection with, and then write a purposeful message which shows that you've read and taken on board their profile, and then you've related their profile back to yourself. So we're going to recap that in a second, but first let's answer just a few more questions. And I have to say, in just a few short minutes, we are also going to be doing a whole Q&A section on this coaching session. So if you haven't sent your question in already, or you'd like to get my advice or my opinion on something, now is the time to send your questions in. And just to remind you as well, if you listen all the way to the end of the session, we're also, for 2 lucky people who have sent their questions in, going to be announcing 2 prize draw winners, one of whom is going to win a 6-month membership with Match. The other is going to win an online coaching program with myself. So really great prizes there. Make sure you stay tuned until the end and get those questions in. Right, for some questions to start with though. First one is, how do you start a conversation with someone you match with? So hopefully we've covered that in the section that we've just spoken about, but remember to keep focused on, do not send generic messages. We want to ban the, hey, how are yous, or how's your weekend goings? We're going to get rid of those. They're not going to be effective. Instead, I want you to look at a person's profile, pick up on a unique detail from their profile, express what you like about it, and then relate that information to yourself. Second question, which is of course related to this, is how do you keep a message conversation going? Now, you know what I'm going to say, right? To begin with, it's not all your responsibility to keep that conversation going and flowing. It is a mutual 2-way street here. So remember, whether it's a conversation you have in real life or a conversation online, it's not just about you having that perfect performance. It has to be a coming together where both sides of the equation here make an effort to keep that conversation alive and going. However, there are some techniques that we can use that can help with this, which should be a little bit familiar to you now from the start of this coaching session. We can remember to only ask questions we really care about the answers to. We want to ask those really big, purposeful questions. I also want you to share information about yourself. So remember, it shouldn't just be an interview. You should also get comfortable with expanding and giving information about yourself. Because remember, with that conversation being a 2-way street, you also want to look out for another person who's equally making that effort to really listen to the responses you're giving and build upon them. Okay, so final question for this section. What's the best way to stay positive after being ghosted, not getting any replies? Now, I'm sure I want to say, first of all, thank you to whoever sent that question in. That's a pretty brave question to ask. And it's also, I think, one that probably lots of people are going to relate to and have had the experience of. To start with, let's look at some really practical things that you can do. As I said right at the beginning of this session, if you're not getting the matches and the connections that you want, that isn't a signal that there's something wrong with who you are as a person. However, it could be an indicator that we really want to enhance your communication. So whether that is rewriting your profile, getting a few new pictures, improving that first message that you send, these are all really tangible things that you can do to help put across better who you are. Secondly, also remember, again, 2-way street, you really want to look out for people who are equally invested and interested and willing in the dating process as you are. So try not to worry about it. Sometimes if a person doesn't respond, it's not a reflection on you. It could just be that they're not that engaged with the whole process of meeting someone online. And remember, you are looking out for someone who is engaged and who is as committed as you are to building that amazing relationship. So quickly to do a little recap here on that very last section that we looked at. When we're sending messages, good first messages are a bit like having really good first conversations. We want to avoid being generic. We want to use specific details. And of course, if you haven't already, please complete your online dating profile. It will make it so much easier for people to message you and for you to have the kind of interactions that you want. So as I said, I really want you to stay tuned, because at the end of this part of the session, in just under half an hour's time, we are going to be mentioning to you who our winners are. So we've got 2 amazing prizes that we're going to be giving away. And right now we have our live Q&A where I will be answering your questions.